earth who will never be Babylon fallen are the remnant people of God that keep the commandments of God and follow the spirit of prophecy. And since the Adventist church has rebelled and chosen apostasy and has become Babylon fallen, and its members are numbered with Babylon, they cannot be the remnant church and people as they continually claim they are. Again, God's promises, including being the remnant, are based upon conditions of obedience. The church and its leadership state in utmost confidence, we are the remnant people and church. We cannot fall. We're going through to the sea of glass. While the truth is completely opposite. They are not the remnant church and people. They do not have a ticket to heaven. You cannot find salvation within the Adventist church, but you will find destruction only. This is the exact same position that the Jewish church and its leadership took. They claimed in utmost confidence, we are the temple of the Lord. The temple of the Lord are we. Yet they were even more corrupt than even the heathen around them. But let's look a little closer at this whole issue of the remnant. In Revelation 12, and remember, a woman in Bible prophecy represents the church. Turn with me to Revelation 12. We'll look at verses 1, 2, and 5. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Now what does this woman represent? It represents a church. And what church in particular are we speaking of here? A church that had 12 stars, or 12 tribes, and that would be the Jewish church. And in verse 5, and she brought forth a man-child, or Christ, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne, Christ ascending to heaven. So Revelation chapter 12, verses 1 through 5 is referring to the Jewish church. But then in verse 6, and all the way through verse 14, it brings out another woman. It says that this woman then fled into the wilderness. And we know that the Jewish church didn't flee into the wilderness. So we see pictured here that God pulls his people out of the Jewish church, and then they have to flee into the wilderness. And it said that they fled into the wilderness through the Dark Ages, or for the 1260 years of papal persecution. And the 1260 years ended in 1798, and what people do we see coming into prominent view around 1798? We see the Protestant churches. Okay, so this woman, through the apostolic period, all the way throughout the Waldensians and all of the people that were being persecuted by the Catholic Church, came into view in 1798, and then we come to Revelation 12:17. Which the Adventist church unconditionally applies to herself forever, regardless of obedience or disobedience. Now let's look at Revelation 12:17. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. And we know that the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, found in Revelation 19:10. But let's define some of the symbols here. Who would represent the dragon? This has representation to Satan, being the dragon. And which church, represented by the seed or the offspring of the woman, came out of the Protestant churches? It would be the Adventist church. So let's reread verse 17 and apply the symbols. And Satan, or the dragon, was wroth with the woman, or the Protestant churches, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, or the Adventist church, or the seed of Protestantism. So in order to be classified as the remnant, you must fulfill the conditions of the remnant by keeping the commandments of God and following the testimony of Jesus, or the spirit of prophecy. Hence, you must be separate from all those churches. And let's pay a particular attention here. It says that Satan made war with the remnant of the Adventist church, the remnant of her seed. So Satan is not making war with the Adventist church. He's making war with those who have separated from the Adventist church, the remnant of her seed, because they keep the commandments of God and follow the spirit of prophecy. The remnant does not refer to those who don't fulfill the conditions. Hence, it cannot refer to the apostate and corrupt Adventist church and people, only to those who fulfill the conditions. The church cannot claim her past obedience as the reason why she's the remnant today. Her condition and standing today will either uphold her as a church of God or condemn her as a church of Satan. And you can find this in Volume 5 of the Testimonies, page 83 and 84. Fruits cannot lie, brothers and sisters. Christ told us in Matthew 7:20, "By their fruits ye shall," not maybe, but ye shall know them. Are the fruits of the Adventist church descriptive of Babylon, or are they fruits descriptive of a remnant church of righteousness? Study, brothers and sisters, examine, and plead with God to lead you in the paths of righteousness, to lead you to a correct understanding of this issue and controversy. Satan is not making war against the church, Protestant or Adventist, because he has them already. He's secure of them because they're already his bride by uniting with the world. Satan is making war with the remnant because they're complete and separate from all these churches. They keep the commandments of God, follow the spirit of prophecy, and are not in connection, either physically or in membership, with any of the corrupt churches, including the Adventist church. These are part of the 144,000. And Revelation 14:4 tells us that these 144,000 are not defiled with women, plural. They have no connection with corrupt churches. They're completely separate from them all because they're followers of Christ, and Christ is nowhere to be found in any of the churches, including the Adventist church. He's departed, never to return. The Adventist church is not the remnant church. They're no longer the bride of Christ because they have transgressed the law of God by uniting with the world, marrying Satan, becoming a harlot, and committing adultery, and have refused to come back to God. They have rejected the spirit of prophecy. Name any area that the Adventist church is following counsels given in the spirit of prophecy. Any area. Is it in health reform? No. Hospitals? No. Education? No. Church structure and organization? Definitely not. Church investments? No. Tithing? No. Insurance? No. Evangelism? No. And you can continue to go on and on and on and on. So then how can they be the remnant church of God, brothers and sisters, if they don't follow the spirit of prophecy as one of the conditions to be the remnant? And then how can you be connected with a church of Babylon and be the remnant also? You can't. There is no such thing as being the remnant of the remnant. There's no way, brothers and sisters. It is a falsehood and a great deception because there is only one true remnant. These keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus, and they have no connection with churches who do not keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. But the deception of the remnant is you believe that you must first be part of the first remnant, or the Adventist church, before you could be part of the second remnant. And that's a great deception, brothers and sisters. It's a grand delusion. There is only one remnant that is of God listed in the Scriptures. And they have no connection with corrupt churches. They follow the commandments of God. They follow Jesus wherever he goes. And they follow the spirit of prophecy. Another grand delusion is the idea that if a church is Laodicea, then they cannot be Babylon at the same time. But can an individual or church in a Babylonian and Laodicean condition exist at the same time? Can you be a church of Babylon and yet be Laodicean at the same time? Many individuals say no. They say you're one or the other. And then they laud the fact that the Adventist church is Laodicean church, so hence she can never be Babylon. But is this true? What does God have to say regarding this, brothers and sisters? Because the great majority of independent, self-supporting ministers and ministries who are constantly holding meetings, reporting the wrongs of the church, but yet they say you have to stay in there, you have to cling to the church. No matter what abominable things the leadership are doing, no matter how corrupt and apostate the system becomes, no matter how much it looks, smells, and acts like Babylon, they will never be Babylon because they're Laodicea. But be sure to support us with your money. Don't send it to the apostate church because you'll be supporting apostasy then. Does that really make sense, brothers and sisters? They stayed in this issue. The church is Laodicea and cannot be Laodicea and Babylon at the same time. They reason that if you're Laodicean, then you're Laodicean forever and can never be Babylon. And so no one is willingly to leave the Laodicean church because they'll never be Babylon. Such statement and reasoning is unfounded by "Thus saith the Lord" and is a specious lie. That reasoning is based solely upon the human reasoning and not upon God's reasoning. All the Protestant church organizations became Babylon in 1844. This means that all the members of these Babylonian Protestant churches are numbered with Babylon. They're part of Babylon. And yet Sister White states this about them. In Volume 6 of the Testimonies, page 76 and 77. The call to the gospel feast is first to be given in the highways. It must be given to those who claim to be in the highways of Christian experience, to the members of the different churches. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches, Revelation 2:7. The Laodicean message, like a sharp, two-edged sword, must go to all the churches. She also writes in Volume 8 of the Testimonies, page 302-4, that the message of Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea are to be given to the world. She also says in Bible Commentary, Volume 7, page 964, column 1, that the Laodicean message is to be sounded forth to a perishing world. Now, why would Sister White be telling us to preach the Laodicean message to the members of these other churches who are already numbered with Babylon, if these members could not also be in the Laodicean condition at the same time? These messages to the 7 churches represent different spiritual conditions in the highways of the Christian experience. That is why a church and its organization can be Babylon fallen, and yet the Laodicean message can be preached to and represent its Babylonian church members at the same time. And it's the same with the Adventist church and its membership. The Adventist church and its hierarchical organization has been a harlot of Babylon since 1903. They have become Babylon fallen shortly after Ellen White's lifetime because the fruits represent it. And yet the Laodicean message represents the condition of the majority of its Babylonian church members today. The only 2 conditions which we can be in our Christian experience, if we're going to heaven at all, is to be found in the Christian experience listed in the 7 churches of Smyrna and Philadelphia. Smyrna represents those who have or will die following Jesus, as Revelation 2:10 tells us, who will be resurrected from the dead, glorified to everlasting life, thus making up the great multitude of the redeemed of all the ages, as we're told in Desire of Ages 8:34, 6:23, and Spirit of Prophecy, Book 3, page 253. While Philadelphia represents the literal number of the 144,000 who have perfected their Christian character, reflecting Christ's image perfectly in this life before Christ comes, as we're told in Acts of the Apostles, page 531, and 3SM, page 427, who will never see or taste of death, as we're told in Prophets and Kings, page 227, and who will be translated in a moment to everlasting life. You can find this in Review and Herald, Book 1, page 94, and page 163. And it's very interesting, brothers and sisters, that it is only these 2 groups of Smyrna and Philadelphia who are persecuted by the synagogue of Satan. This satanic group states that they are Jews or the followers of Christ, that they are the remnant church, but they do lie. And did you know that Sister White identifies who makes up this group of the synagogue of Satan? In Word to the Little Flock on page 12, you think that those who worship before the saints' feet, Revelation 3:9, dealing with the synagogue of Satan, will at last be saved? Here I must differ with you, for God show me that this class were professed Adventists who had fallen away and crucified to themselves the Son of God afresh, and put him to an open shame. So who does the synagogue of Satan represent, brothers and sisters, who say they are Jews, just like they did anciently, but they do lie? Professed Adventists who have given up the truth of God. And what is another name for the synagogue of Satan? For the synagogue of God's enemy? Babylon. We're told this in Review and Herald, Volume 3, page 447, column 2. Or March 16, 1897. Another name for the synagogue of Satan is Babylon, brothers and sisters. In fact, I went through the writings of Ellen White found on the CD-ROM and also went through the Bible and paid particular attention to the various characteristics that Babylon produces, the various fruits that describe Babylon. And I've put these on in two studies, one strictly from the Scriptures and one strictly from the Spirit of Prophecy. And if you would like copies of these, please write to this ministry. It's amazing, brothers and sisters, what fruits are revealed in the Bible and the Spirit of Prophecy about Babylon, and then comparing them to what you see in the church. And a church does not have to produce every single fruit of Babylon before they can be Babylon fallen. The Seventh-day Adventist church are definitely Babylon fallen, yet they keep the Sabbath still. So you don't have to fulfill every single condition in order to be Babylon. The condition that Ellen White and thus God brought forth that will convert the Adventist church into Babylon was by departing from Christ, uniting themselves with the world, committing harlotry, and then refusing to repent. Another confusing issue is the issue of staying in the church no matter how corrupt it would become, and that if you're righteous, live a righteous life, live up to all the truth that you know, that God will protect your purity while you remain in the corrupt Adventist church. Most take it for granted that if they do so, nothing's going to happen to them because God would protect them. But can an innocent and righteous person be unaffected by continued willing association in an apostate, corrupt, and deadly atmosphere of Babylon? Let's not rest our understanding on human reasoning, brothers and sisters. Let's go directly to the Bible and the Spirit of Prophecy, as Isaiah 8:20 tells us to do, to the law and to the testimony. Let's apply it and see where the truth lies in this issue. In Volume 4, Review and Herald, page 137, and this is column 2. It is impossible. Now, is there any loopholes around the word impossible? No, it's an absolute. It is impossible for you to unite with those who are corrupt and still remain pure. What fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness? And what concord hath Christ with Belial? God and Christ and the heavenly host would have man know that if he unites with the corrupt, he will become corrupt. So if we believe that we can willingly remain in a corrupt apostate church and still retain our purity, God says we're wrong. It is impossible for us to retain our purity while we willingly remain and knowingly remain in a corrupt apostate church. we will become corrupt. The only way to keep ourselves from being corrupted is to spiritually and physically separate ourselves from all those things which are corrupt, including a church. An example that God has given us is in nature, dealing with a muddy pool. If we find ourselves within a muddy pool, are we contaminated with the mud? Most definitely. Our feet are right there. In fact, the closer we get to the center of that pool, the deeper in mud we become. But what if we go to the most shallowest edge of that pool? What if we even take 1 foot out of the pool but leave 1 foot in? Are we still contaminated with the mud? Try it. You'll find that your foot becomes all muddy. No longer is it pure until you get out of that muddy pool and then have all the dirt cleansed away from you. But if you jump right back in after being cleansed, then you're contaminated with the mud. And it's the same with us, brothers and sisters. There is no way that you can be pure while you remain willingly and knowingly in the midst of a corrupt church. There's no way on earth. And there's no way in truth either. The same's with a barrel of apples. If you have a barrel of apples and the very center apple in that barrel becomes corrupted, becomes spoiled and rotten, what's going to happen to all the other apples connected with it? They're also going to become spoiled and rotten because of the connection with the corrupt apple. Now, God tried to remove that corrupt apple in 1901. He tried to remove all the General Conference leadership and to start over on another foundation. But the church refused to go along with God. They chose to remain a corrupt church. And so now the heart of the work, this corrupt apple, is now beginning to corrupt all the other apples in connection with it. What's the only way to save the barrel, brothers and sisters? What's the only way to save the good apples in that barrel? The only way left is to pick out, to separate away from that corrupt barrel, that corrupt church, the good apples. And if the good apples choose to remain knowing that the center apple is corrupt, then they're no longer pure. Every single apple that's connected in that barrel, even those that are on the very shallowest edge, the very farthest away from that center apple, are going to be corrupted by their connection with it. And it's the same with the church, brothers and sisters. There's no way that you can find an Adventist church way out in the boonies, way out in the sticks, that is pure as long as that church is connected with the General Conference, that corrupt apple. And you being connected with that church that's connected with the General Conference are corrupt as well. Even the wheat teach a lesson that if they remain in connection with the tares, they will become spoiled by that connection. In Volume 8 of the Testimonies, page 326, even the tares have a lesson. They are of Satan's sowing, and if left unchecked, spoil the wheat by their rank growth. So then how do the wheat, or the children of God, the children of the kingdom, save themselves from being polluted and spoiled and rotten? They must be harvested completely out of the field or out of the corrupt church in order to make it into the garner, into heaven. But some still think that they can just leave those Adventist churches which are blatantly in apostasy and join some out-of-the-way Adventist church which appears to be unaffected by the apostasy. But is this possible? We've already gone through the example of a muddy pool and a barrel of apples. But is this possible, brothers and sisters? Absolutely not. In Volume 4 of the Testimonies, page 210, if the heart of the work becomes corrupt, the whole church, what did Spirit of Prophecy tell us? If the heart of the work becomes corrupt, some of the church? Just the churches that teach blatant apostasy, but not those way out in the sticks? The whole church in its various branches and interests scattered abroad over the face of the earth, suffers in consequence. So not just the churches here in North America would suffer, but all of those around the world would suffer because of the corrupt General Conference, the heart of the work. So for those who are saying that their particular Adventist church is free from apostasy and corruption are mistaken. Because if any church is connected with the corrupt General Conference through the divisions, through the unions, and etc., then they cannot be pure either. They have also become apostate and corrupt along with all the members who reside in it. And if our people will not awaken to this fact and flee for their very lives, they will find themselves perishing and dying within Babylon, but they will be blind to the fact that they are in Babylon, just like Zedekiah of old. Because Zedekiah rebelled against God and led Israel into sin, he was taken captive by Babylon, but his eyes were put out, thus becoming blind, and was led directly into the heart of Babylon. His whole house became established there, and there he died. But because he was blind, he never saw that he was really within Babylon and a part of it. And this same sad experience is occurring again with my Adventist people who refuse to awaken to the fact that their Adventist church of today has also become Babylon fallen, and they refuse to flee for their lives. Now, some will still refuse to believe that their Adventist church can ever become or really has become Babylon fallen. But Sister White warned that the Adventist church could be converted into Babylon, showing that there was that possibility. In Volume 2 of the Selected Messages, page 68,